So we have been listening from in the womb. So Trevor, what's this hype about listening? Stick around for the next few minutes with me, and we will see as we explore building resilience with discerning listening. I'm Trevor E.S. Smith. I'm with the Success with People Academy, and I will be your guide as we examine this issue of listening. You know, what's the cost of ineffective listening, miscommunication? Let us look at some examples. You say, okay, we have been listening from infancy. Listening and hearing are different things, as we will see. Look, ineffective listening or communication led to the loss of a spacecraft. Yes, 1999, the Mars Climate Orbiter had a problem where one side or one department of NASA was using metric units while the other was using imperial units. And that caused a loss of a spacecraft. Communication, listening is a part of communication. Let's look at this. United Airlines had a big backlash as they sought to forcibly remove somebody from a flight. You know, I was in exactly this position with an airline called Liat in the Caribbean. They, consistently overbooked flights. Yes. And they came to the door and they said, Trevor Smith, and I identified myself and they said, come here, please. I said, no, all right, you come. What they recognize, and that's the difference with the United Airlines individuals, is that the Liat personnel realized that I was taking a D-style, a dominant stance. I had booked, I had my reservations just like everybody else, and I was not pulling my seatbelt. If you want to get me out of here, you have to lift me up. And they recognized it, and we just smiled and we moved on. So listening, and not just listening, but discerning listening makes a difference. When you can pick up behavioral styles and understand the dynamics of the situation, based on a deeper understanding, you can actually achieve much. So let us look at the cost as well. David Grossman, these are publications from SHRM that indicate that over $62 million have been lost through communication, inadequate communication issues among employees. And that's larger companies. But even small enterprises, in the region of 100 employees, are still spending like $400,000 a year because of miscommunication. But there can be more. There can be instances, as it says here, of issues that you might actually be taken to court. You might lose talent, because people are saying, hey, what's happening here? I can't live in this toxic environment. So listening and discerning listening is important. I know people believe because it is something that they have been doing all of these years that they are good at it, but it's not true. It's not true. In my experience, a lot of conflict comes from the failure to listen effectively. All right. So poor listening can produce a lot of other unwanted outcomes. Listen to this. And this happens in the workplace where we make assumptions, we miss details. Again, I'm going to put myself on the block here. I went overseas. I was responsible for the region, and I went to my agent and I listened carefully, I thought, and I produced an order that I thought that they were saying that this is what I heard. I went, and when we sent the shipping documents, oh my gosh, you're saying what? that's it's not even close to what we discussed. Oops. All right. I don't know. Maybe I was in a dream, but I was sure and I was careful. So what I'm not saying is that listening is important. Listening is important, but this is a different kind of listening now. It's not just hearing. There is a listening that is proactive in the sense that the classic case, one individual gets raw data. One individual gets raw data. That individual spends time massaging that data and repackaging the data, sends it to the colleague, and the colleague says, I can't deal with this. I have to unpack it in order to use it. So there is this failure to communicate in the sense that how do you want this data? How do you want me to serve you? That's the kind of information that is required for us to be resilient, for us to be successful. That part of the dialogue is not taking place. People are just presenting information and expecting that it will land the way that the individual wants it. What if we could start to ask more questions about how do you want your information? How can I serve you better? That's an anchor for a resilient enterprise. And so that's a missing piece as well. So it's not just I didn't hear you properly or I made an assumption. It is how do I proactively go about finding out how you want to get your information. All right. The other thing is then communication. Again, I work a lot with teams, with organizations in terms of helping their team dynamics and helping them to be more productive. And one of the things that I've found is that there's a lot of conflict that comes from simply a failure to understand different behavioral styles. Yes. So somebody comes across as being dominant, pushy. This person seems to ask too many questions. There are big challenges that come simply from a failure to understand each other. And I'm suggesting that if we are going to be resilient, if the organization is going to be resilient, we can avoid some of these things. We can sort out some of these things. And that's why I'm suggesting that listening is a cornerstone of resilience. Yeah. All right. I hope this is going somewhere for you. But there's further impact as it relates now to missed opportunities. How do we communicate that there are challenges, that this is a way that we could go to solve problems? When we have difficulties in terms of communicating in ways that all our team members, all our stakeholders can be understood. One challenge, for example, again in terms of this listening issue, is that you have team members who are not ready to be forthcoming. They're not ready to put up their hands to say, hey, I have an idea, because they're feeling maybe my idea is not as good as the others. Let me hear what the others have to say first. And that goes on until the session is over and we miss their critical input. In an environment which understands differences in behavioral styles, the leaders, the facilitators will make sure to bring out those ideas from people who are not as ready to put up their hands and to say, hey, I have this brilliant idea. And so as a result of that, we're not tapping into all the ideas. We're not, and then of course we have the sensibilities where we are saying, oh no, not again, Trevor. As he puts up his hand, we are saying, I know what he's going to say. We have to break down those things. And that is why I'm saying to you, there's a call for a different level, a different kind of listening. And that will make a difference to resilience in your organization. And that's basically the framework, the concept that we have pulled together on top of the DISC framework, where we have this discerning model of listening. So it's discerning communication, discerning leadership, discerning listening. And It's built on the DISC framework. Right. So if you have been coming to our live class, but anyway, DISC is well known. It comes from the Carl Jung concept that we can classify how people respond to life's unfolding events into four groups. We're not saying four groups of persons. So the way that I present it, so that this misunderstanding that this is craziness because we can, we have more than four kinds of people, that's not anywhere near what the concept is. What Jung said is that you can classify in the same way that we classify in grammar. We have nouns, verbs, etc. He's not saying that everything is a noun, or it's just a classification, and classifications help us to navigate through life. And what he's saying is, if you observe the philosophies, the mindset that goes into how we receive information, how we perceive what's happening in life, we can classify those mindsets, etc. I like to say that we have four bags of tools, four big bags of tools that we use to navigate through life. And the four bags are dominance, inducement, Jung used, but nowadays people are calling it influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. So there's a DISC, that's basically the DISC framework. But within the dominance bag, there are several tools. So there are nuances of dominance, there are nuances of influence, nuances of steadiness. And then, of course, people use multiple tools. So at any given point in time, I might have my hand in the I bag of tools and in the D bag of tools. So the key then is not to try to label me as either D, I, S, or C. The key is to try to understand, just the same way that you can see that I have taken out a shovel, you can see that I have taken out a saw, you see that I take out a hammer. Learn to pick up what tools are being used. If I am taking out a hammer, it might suggest that I'm not about to cut a piece of wood, supposedly. Yes. And if I take out a saw, it should mean that I'm not about to drive a nail in which case it's similar ideas if you can look at what tools are being used. Yeah. If I smile at you, it should ideally suggest to you that I want to connect, that I'm not threatening you. Yeah. And so your response to my smile shouldn't be to take your gun and shoot me or, run away, because that's not what the message is. That basically, in this 10 seconds that I'm going here, gives you what it is when we talk about the DISC framework or DISCerning listening, the DISCerning model, or just understand DISC. A lot of you might be even have a DISC analysis. What does it really mean when it puts me in the DISC quadrant or that quadrant? It just means that you have a preference. There's a little video that was run on you at a particular point in time, and it indicated that you had a preference for this bag of tools as against another bag of tools. That's important, that we understand how to pick up what tool is being used at a given point in time and what is the appropriate response to that tool. Also, what tool should I pick out in every situation so that I am behaving appropriately and behaving in a way to get the best results. So on the right hand side here, I use extended DISC as my behavioral DNA assessment tool, and extended DISC picks up two sides. It picks up my natural style, who I am deep inside, and the perceived need to adjust. How do I behave in this particular environment in order to get the best results? So on the right hand side over here, you will see this is my natural style. So it's the DISC, and this is one of the graphical representation to show that in this case, the individual would have a preference for D and I, and so on. And then over here is the perceived need to adjust. Right. So moving from my natural style, this is how I perceive, in which case it would indicate to this individual or it would suggest that individual thinks that increasing their use of influence would be more beneficial. All right, so that's the idea. But for us, the key is not so much. Well, that's not true because it is important for us to understand ourselves. But the key is to be able to identify the tools that are being used, what is coming out of the bag, or what we should go for in the bag, and how that impacts communication. All right. So from that, then we can see that discerning listening can actually transcend a lot of these surface interactions. That's why we're saying, okay, fine, we have been listening from infancy, yes, but are we understanding? Are we putting out the nuances? There's a threat, so-called threat of AI. One of the things that AI is not able to do is what I'm suggesting, is to pick out those nuances, is to have a more nuanced understanding of unfolding events. I give you, again, my example that I use is Nike's slogan, just do it. Now, different individuals can hear that just do it in different ways. It can be just do it, an encouragement, or just do it, a command, do. Yeah. Depending on your perspective, if somebody says to you, man, just do it, it's a different, you can hear it differently. Is he telling me better do it or else? Or is he saying, come on, it's all right, you can do it? It makes a difference because then that impacts my relationship with this individual. That's what we're talking about, is getting to a place where we are more nuanced in our understanding. That's the kind of listening that's going to make a difference in terms of how we understand the motivations of the speakers, what perspective they're bringing, what kinds of emotions should we, how should we respond, and what kind of perception do we have about their emotions that are coming across. That to me is a huge problem with team dynamics every single day. How do we hear Trevor? Is he a bully? Is he someone that's never listens, that just want to shout at people? And how do we understand Carl, who keeps asking more and more questions? Is he just an annoying person, or is it critical for him to have data? Is he evidence driven and definitely would prefer to have all answers before making a decision? What about Susie, who allows David to talk to her in a way without, well, not even pushing back, without asking questions, without feeling a need to be submissive? And Ivan, yeah, is Ivan really serious about this job? Because he seems to, have a sort of fun approach. But Ivan sees no reason why we can't get to the top of the mountain singing songs. Yeah, we don't have to be grinding. Oh, it's so challenging. We can actually. So all I'm saying is that this approach helps us to remove a lot of this the problem, the toxicity that currently inhabits a lot of teams. So that's where I'm going with discerning communication as a key factor in building resilience. So how do we actually apply some of these things? Well, key number one is where I have been so far. I've been saying to you, learn to identify the tools that are being used. And you can pick it up, you can practice. Well, we train persons in terms of our success with people workshops, where we teach people basically how to read behaviors, how to, if you want to call it, read people for success. Once upon a time, we used to call it reading people for success. But then, of course, it's not reading people. So we have to kind of cross through the teeth and put that in quotation marks because it's really the reading behaviors. So on a telephone call, even, you can hear, if you train your telephone operator to understand the DISC framework or discerning communication model, they can hear, that this individual who is on the other line, on the other side of the line, if you put them on hold twice, when you come back, you're getting dial tone because they're gone. You know, you can also know that this individual who's calling in, might just want to have a conversation, and we just don't have the time right now for a conversation. How do you deal with that? So that's what we're saying, is that the framework can be used. If you go into a meeting, you go into negotiations, you need to understand the behavioral nuances that are at play, and not just listen to words. Pick up body language, pick up what's going on with the words actually even that are being used. Yeah. Certain words produce um, a certain kind of emotion. Right. All right. So once we then understand the tools that are being used, the other key would be for us then to adjust appropriately. We want to use the most appropriate language, the most appropriate behavior for every situation. That's important. So adjusting, we're calling it flexing the style, is another popular way of looking at it, that we can adjust our listening in order to create an environment that we want. And that in turn builds resilience. All right. So the other thing is practice active listening. So it's not just that then about identifying different behavioral styles. It's also about going back to communication 101. Eye contact, nod, show that the person active listening, right? So we know that we don't have to spend time on that here today, but that is important as well, that we build into our communication 101 skills this capacity to pick up the DISC tool that is being used. Makes a difference. And of course, we have also looked at the whole question of the seek first to understand. We know that as well. The key, the way that I like to look at it, is the key is to try to communicate from inside the other person's shoes. Put yourself in their shoes, understand where they're coming from, understand all of the nuances around their existing situation. What is it that they're going through? How it is that they want to communicate? And if we can put ourselves into their shoe, then obviously there's going to be a sense of empathy. There's going to be a completely different approach to the messages that you are sending and how you're going to receive the individual's message. So that kind of listening with empathy is what we're talking about. That is where discerning listening makes a huge difference, because once you have that environment, then people are going to be more trusting of others. They're going to feel more comfortable sharing and opening up. And of course, in that environment, you're going to have more honest and timely feedback. People are going to feel more comfortable sharing. Trevor, maybe that approach that you have, or what you're doing, is not right. As against, boy, I don't want to talk anything to Trevor because he's going to bite off my head. No, we get a situation of trust, and I also understand when the feedback comes that it is in my best interest. It is to support me, it's to help me. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying that discerning listening, incorporating active listening, makes a huge difference in terms of our resilience. So, what is the bottom line? Right? And by the way, in a minute or two, I have two invitations that I think you should stick around. One of them is being run below here in the banner, where I'm suggesting we have a nice publication, invested some resources really in producing a nice, neat, graphically pleasing publication on discerning listening. I'm offering it to you free. One of our treasured publications. So you can send me an email at info@successwithpeople.org and get your copy of Discerning Listening. All right. So what have we been saying? Listening. Yes, I know we have been listening from infancy, but there's a different kind of listening. And that different kind of listening is the cornerstone of our quest for resilience and the capacity to thrive in this highly competitive area. Yeah, people are at the heart of resilience. Yes, and so listening is a part, because that's communication is important if people are involved. And so discerning listening, which we have been sharing, is it really works to reduce conflict. When people have learned, and we call it learning the language of behaviors, when people have learned to use the discerning communication, conflicts are reduced. We're not saying it, these are humans, so that it's never ever totally removed, but it's significantly reduced. And there is a greater level of engagement. People understand. People are able to shut off this and to say, hey, okay, fine, I understand. Yeah, he's driven, he wants to get these things done. And so I understand where the impatience is coming from. Those are some of the things that come with an understanding of discerning listening, training in the area, that will make life easier for us. And we can apply it in the workplace, outside of the workplace. It reduces conflict and misunderstandings to a high degree. And so basically, it also helps us to communicate and engage across different perspectives, different viewpoints. We don't have to have all the same views, but we can be in a place where we better understand the need to listen to others. So my other invitation, as I said, you can get the book by just simply sending an email to info@successwithpeople.org. But I'm of the firm belief that building resilience and having a deeper understanding of how to listen in a discerning way is helped by getting a personal DNA behavioral assessment. And so I'm throwing it out that I do, as it stands right now, a lot of work with leaders who do a behavioral assessment, and we get online for half an hour and look at what is it that this analysis is saying. What are the blind spots that you might be missing? What are the limiting factors that you might be missing? And you get a lot of value. Get a lot of value from that 30-minute session that we do with them, where we understand, because all of the assessments that we do are aligned to the individual's role. So we understand their role, we get their job descriptions, etc., and we know what it is that they are supposed to do. And in that conversation, we leave with clear steps. This is a behavior that you should reinforce. This is a behavior that you need to work on in order to get to the place. And I'm suggesting that if you do the assessment, I'm giving you the assessment free, I am prepared to spend a valuable half an hour with you. So you can send me an email, info@successwithpeople.org, or you can just WhatsApp me, 1-876-535-6677. All right, so that's one invitation. Here is our discerning listening book, which I'm offering to you as well. Again, info@successwithpeople.org. And who are we? We are part of the InfoServe group. We are a SHRM recertification provider, and the Success with People Academy is then able to provide recertification credits that can be applied to your SHRM CP or your SHRM SCP recertifications. Basically, it's a mark to say that we operate at a quality level at international standards. And so we deploy our discerning model of communication and leadership to help organizations to be more productive, to be more resilient. And the process, we definitely like to anchor what it is that we do on a behavioral DNA assessment from Extended DISC on the Revolutionary Fix platform. We try to get out of here in a half an hour. Sometimes we get over a couple of minutes. I think I'm good today. So let's have a conversation and be happy. I'm going to send this to you if you have registered the recording. You can share with your colleagues, and look forward to seeing you next week as we have another Success with People live cast.